The Terran fleet emerged from hyperspace into the heart of the Devourer's domain. A dense star field stretched across the void, but many of the stars were dim or blackened entirely. Planets drifted like ashes in the cosmic wind, stripped bare, lifeless, their surfaces scarred by hunger. Admiral Kira Voss stood on the bridge of the Iron Resolve, her hands resting on the rail. Around her, the fleet prepared for the final confrontation. The weapon from the Ark glowed faintly across the command network, its presence weaving through shields, navigation systems, and communications. It was alive in a sense humans could understand. It was a force of adaptation, prediction, and calculated power. "This is it," she said quietly. "All the calls, all the warnings, all the destruction, it ends here. Humanity is going to answer the universe." Captain Holt, standing beside her, gave a nod. "It's time." In orbit, the fleet faced a sea of the enemy. The Devourers had gathered in massive numbers, their forms pulsing with energy. They moved like a living storm stretching across the void. Every ship the humans had fought before seemed tiny against this force, but they did not hesitate. "Fighters launch," Kira ordered. "All squadrons hit their flanks. Protect the fleet." From the carriers, human pilots leaped into the void, weaving between enemy constructs, firing missiles and striking at weak points. Battleships opened energy volleys, tearing apart advancing swarm vessels. Every Terran ship coordinated perfectly with the weapon's adaptive systems, responding to the Devourer's shifts before the enemy even moved. On the bridge of the Valiant Dawn, Commander Reyes watched the chaos. "They adapt fast," he said. "But so do we." A young pilot beside him grinned. "Faster than anything they've ever seen." Reyes nodded. "That's the point. Humans don't give up." Below, in the Ark, the weapon interfaced directly with the fleet. Its glowing energy extended into communication networks, shield generators, and targeting arrays. Dr. Ilara Miles monitored the patterns. "It's learning," she said to Kira. "It's predicting enemy movements and giving the fleet the optimal responses. We're fighting as one organism with it. We can overwhelm them if we stay coordinated." Kira's eyes burned with determination. "Then we stay coordinated. Humans adapt, humans endure. That is what the universe has not seen before." The battle raged for hours. The Devourers struck hard, tearing into the Terran lines. One battleship, the Iron Fist, was caught in a focused attack, its shields failing. The crew fought to stabilize it, but escape seemed impossible. "Stand your ground." Kira's voice rang through every comm channel. "Every ship alive is a strike against them." "Hold the line!" Fighters dived in, distracting the enemy long enough for the battleship to recover. The weapon amplified their efforts, predicting attacks and guiding defensive maneuvers. Every strike became more precise, every movement more deadly. Human ingenuity shone. Where one plan failed, a dozen new tactics emerged. When the enemy adapted, the Terrans adapted faster. In the midst of the chaos, Admiral Voss observed a massive core in the enemy formation. It pulsed with energy, controlling the swarm, feeding off every destroyed planet and star. It was the heart of the Devourers. "This is it," she said, determination hardening her voice. "Destroy the core and the swarm will collapse. Everything depends on it." Captain Holt looked at her. "The core is heavily protected. Any approach will be suicidal." Kira's eyes narrowed. "Then humanity will do what no one else can. We will fight the impossible." She turned to the comms. "Fleet, focus fire on the swarm. Protect each other. Keep the core in sight. We will strike as one." Fighters, guided by the weapon, carved a path through the enemy, opening gaps in the protective swarm around the core. Battleships poured energy into the breach. The Devourers lashed out with everything, but the humans' coordination, foresight, and adaptability allowed them to counter. On the Iron Resolve, Kira prepared a special strike team. The weapon had created a predictive map of the core's vulnerabilities. "This is the one chance," she said. "We go in fast, precise, and with everything we have. Follow me." The team launched in modified attack shuttles, small but heavily armed, weaving through enemy lines with pinpoint accuracy. The rest of the fleet kept the swarm distracted, feeding off the weapon's guidance. As the strike team approached the core, energy waves radiated outward, knocking shuttles off course. Yet Kira remained focused. "Keep steady. Aim for the nodes the weapon identified. One strike will be enough to destabilize them." The team fired. Explosions rippled across the core's surface, energy surging and sparks flying. The core trembled but held. Then the weapon itself interfaced, amplifying their attack, sending waves of adaptive energy that tore through the Devourers' defenses. A deafening pulse exploded from the core. The swarm faltered, then broke apart, retreating in chaos. Planets and stars, once consumed, were no longer under immediate threat. The heart of the Devourers had been struck, and the galaxy felt the first breath of relief in centuries. Back on the bridge, Kira watched as the enemy fell into disarray. Ships once coordinated and terrifying now collided and retreated into the void. The Terran fleet, battered but unbroken, had survived. Captain Holt exhaled, exhausted but smiling. "We did it. The core is gone." Kira shook her head slowly. "The core is not gone, but it is broken. The Devourers will recover eventually, but they will remember who struck them first. Humanity." Dr. Miles entered the bridge, eyes shining. "Admiral, the weapon is stabilizing. The Ark's energy is spreading across the fleet. Shields, weapons, navigation, all systems are optimized. The Devourers never expected this level of adaptation." Kira nodded. "We are the answer they never anticipated. We fight, we endure, and we survive. That is what makes humanity different." As the fleet regrouped, the survivors aboard damaged ships looked at each other with a mixture of relief and awe. They had faced an enemy capable of consuming galaxies, and had not only survived but had struck a decisive blow. Sergeant Malik Juno, speaking to his unit over the comms, said, "Remember this day. Remember that even in the darkest void humans rise. The Devourers thought they could erase us. They were wrong." In the fleet, pilots cheered. Engineers clapped each other on the back. Humanity had not only answered the cry for help, they had become the universe's shield. Kira stood on the bridge of the Iron Resolve, looking out at the stars. The galaxy was wounded, but hope had returned. The Ark's weapon, alive and humming with energy, would guide humanity in the battles to come. The Devourers would recover, but the humans had proven that courage, ingenuity, and determination could defy even the greatest darkness. Captain Holt joined her. "What now, Admiral?" Kira's eyes were steady, her voice calm but powerful. "Now we continue. We rebuild where we can. We protect where we must. And if the Devourers return, we will be ready. Humanity will always answer the call." The fleet prepared for the journey home, but the stars no longer seemed threatening. They held promise. Each planet, each star, was a life to defend, a world to save. Humanity's reach had extended farther than ever, and their legend across the galaxy had begun. The Deathworlders had answered the universe's cry for help. And in doing so, they had become its hope. For the first time in countless centuries, the galaxy breathed, and humanity stood at its side, unwavering, unbroken, unstoppable. The signal was weak, almost like a whisper lost in endless space. Across the dark ocean between the stars, it flickered on forgotten channels, repeating the same desperate message again and again. It came from a small world in a far corner of the galaxy. Its people, exhausted and broken, had sent their cry for help without hope of an answer. Their enemies were ruthless. Their cities had burned, their skies were blackened, and their fleets had been scattered like dust. They had known the chances. In the great galactic community, no one risked their own safety for another. Survival meant caution. Caution meant silence. And so the cry was left unanswered, except Earth listened. On a quiet night inside a deep space listening post orbiting Saturn, a young operator named Elias caught the faint pulse of the signal. His eyes narrowed as he leaned over his console, adjusting the filters and amplifiers. At first he thought it was static or a natural cosmic echo, but then the repeating pattern became clear. It was a language coded and pleading. "Unknown source. Repeating distress call," Elias whispered, his voice trembling as the translation software pieced together broken words. "Help us. They are coming. We cannot stand. Please, anyone." He sat frozen, staring at the words. For a moment he considered reporting it as interference. That would have been easy, but something inside him refused. He tapped the alert line, sending the signal higher up the chain. Within minutes, the control room filled with officers and scientists, all leaning in toward the flickering message from the void. On Earth, the news spread quickly through the halls of the Terran Coalition. Leaders, military commanders, and scholars gathered. The room fell into silence as the transmission played once more. The alien voices were faint, but the pain inside them was unmistakable. Some officials spoke with fear. This is none of our concern. We cannot risk our people for strangers. Those who sent this message are doomed. Why sacrifice ourselves? Others argued back. They asked for help. If we stay silent, what does that make us? Did humanity not suffer in the same way once? Did we not wish for a savior? The debate raged for hours. The galaxy called humans Deathworlders, a name that had once been an insult but now carried weight. Earth was a world of storms, earthquakes, plagues, and predators. To survive there, humanity had learned to fight, to adapt, and to endure what others could not. Now the question was simple. Would Deathworlders answer the call? Across the oceans, deserts, and cities of Earth, the people followed the news. Screens lit up in crowded streets, reports played across stations, and conversations shifted from markets to classrooms. Everywhere the same question was whispered. Will we go? Some feared it. Humanity was still young in spacefaring terms. Their fleet was strong but not the strongest. To face an enemy that had crushed another species might be suicide. Yet others felt something stir in their hearts. For the first time, aliens had asked humanity for help. Not as conquerors, not as overlords, but as equals. Desperate souls in need. In a small town on Earth, a retired soldier named Captain Rena stood in her kitchen, watching the broadcast. She remembered the long battles humanity had fought on their own soil in the past centuries. She remembered the faces of civilians waiting for someone, anyone, to come. She whispered to herself, "We cannot be like the others. We cannot turn away." On Luna's great shipyard, engineers began talking quietly among themselves. They spoke of unused warships sitting in dry dock, of carriers that could be restored, of new prototypes waiting for a reason to fly. When the order came, they promised they would be ready. Back on Saturn's listening post, Elias still sat at his console, the words of the SOS repeating endlessly in his ears. To him, they no longer sounded like strangers. They sounded like neighbors he had not yet met. Finally, after days of debate, the Terran Coalition Council reached their decision. The chamber was tense, every official seated in silence as the chairman rose. His voice was calm but firm. "The galaxy calls us Deathworlders. They fear our resilience, they misunderstand our nature. But today we will show them who we truly are. We will not let this call go unanswered. We will not turn away." With those words, the order was given. Across the solar system, messages lit up shipyards, military academies, and civilian docks. Ships that had sat quiet for years powered their reactors. Volunteer lists grew longer than expected, filled not only with soldiers but also with doctors, engineers, and explorers. People from every nation and colony signed their names not for glory, but because they could not bear to do nothing. The alien plea had reached them. Humanity would respond. The signal from that faraway world continued, weak and fading, but soon it would no longer echo alone. Somewhere out there, a broken people believed no one had heard them. Soon, they would see shapes appear in their skies, ships forged in the harsh lessons of Earth. For the first time in the galaxy's long silence, Deathworlders would rise not as destroyers, but as protectors, and the void itself seemed to tremble, as if the stars knew. The answer had been given. The order had been given. The Terran Coalition would not remain silent. Humanity, the so-called Deathworlders, had chosen to rise. Across the solar system, the news spread like fire in dry grass. Screens glowed with announcements. Radios hummed with reports. On Earth, on Luna, on Mars, even on distant colonies carved into asteroids, people stopped what they were doing to listen. For some, the message brought fear. To face a great enemy was no small step. But for many more, the message brought pride. Humanity was going, and they would go not as conquerors, but as defenders. The fleet awakens in Luna's vast shipyards, where steel towers reached into the black sky. Old warships rested in silence. Some had fought in earlier conflicts, their hulls scarred and worn. Others had never left dry dock, abandoned after budgets had cut short their promise. Now welders lit their torches. Sparks rained down like shooting stars as crews worked day and night. Engineers reactivated dormant reactors, polished sensor arrays, and strengthened armor plates. Carriers, cruisers, and destroyers began to hum with life. Everywhere banners appeared on hulls. Some bore names of Earth's oceans, mountains, or cities. Others carried personal touches, painted symbols of unity, courage, or remembrance. The fleet was not only steel and fuel, it was the heart of humanity, forged together. On Mars, factories shifted production. Civilian transports were refitted with medical bays, turning them into rescue ships. Small mining crafts were armored and armed, their crews volunteering to serve as scouts. No vessel was too small if it meant saving lives. The call for volunteers. The coalition broadcast a single message: volunteers are needed. The response was overwhelming. Soldiers stepped forward, veterans who remembered Earth's past battles and young recruits who longed to prove themselves. Doctors, nurses, and medics volunteered, saying they would not let the wounded be forgotten. Engineers signed up, promising they could keep ships flying even under fire. Even civilians came. Teachers, historians, linguists, all believed they might help in some way. Some would cook meals, some would keep records, some would comfort the frightened. No task was too small. Among the first to enlist was Captain Rena, the retired soldier who had once whispered in her kitchen, "We cannot turn away." She came out of retirement, her uniform pressed, her eyes firm. When asked why, she simply replied, "Because if not us, then who?" The doubt of leaders inside the coalition council chambers, debate still echoed. Though the decision had been made, some leaders whispered fears. What if we fail? What if our fleet is crushed? Then we will learn. Then we will rebuild, another answered. The chairman, who had given the final order, stood once more before them. We have always been tested. Earth itself tested us with storms, hunger, and wars. Each time we survived. Each time we grew stronger. If we fall helping others, not hiding in silence. That alone will make us greater. The chamber fell silent. No one argued further. The alien survivors far away on the broken world where the SOS had first been sent, survivors still huddled in the ruins of their cities. They had given up hope. Their skies were ash, their rivers poisoned, their homes shattered. Each day they feared the return of their enemies who would sweep down to finish what they had begun. But then one night a small listening outpost caught a signal. At first they thought it was another false hope, a cruel trick of static. But the translation confirmed it. Humanity had heard. Humanity was coming. The survivors wept. They did not know this species well. They had only heard whispers of Deathworlders, a strange people from a dangerous planet, often spoken of with fear. And yet these were the ones who answered. Why? One alien asked. Because they are different, another whispered. In their darkest hour, hope returned like the first sunrise after a long winter. Training for the unknown on Earth and its colonies, soldiers trained harder than ever before. Combat simulators projected scenarios of alien warfare. Tactics were rewritten, strategies tested. The enemy was stronger and more advanced, but humans had something rare: flexibility. On one training ground, Captain Rena led her unit through drills. She watched as recruits struggled but did not give up. She told them, "We are not the largest fleet. We are not the most advanced. But we are the ones who adapt. That is our weapon." Pilots practiced maneuvers inside asteroid fields. Engineers tested emergency repairs under pressure. Medics drilled for mass casualties. Everyone prepared not for an easy fight but for survival. The weight of departure families gathered at spaceports. Mothers hugged children. Fathers embraced sons and daughters. Friends clasped hands. Many of those who left knew they might not return, but none stepped back. Elias, the young operator who first caught the SOS, stood in the crowd at the departure station. Though not a soldier, he had been assigned to the fleet as a communications officer. He carried no weapon, but he carried something else, the knowledge that he had been the first to hear the call. He whispered to himself as he boarded, "I will see them. I will tell them they were not alone." Unity and diversity humanity had never been fully united before. Nations, cultures, and colonies had often argued, often disagreed. But now, under one purpose, they stood together. Ships carried crews from every background, speaking many languages, singing many songs. Some nights, when the work was done, people gathered in shipyards and sang old Earth songs. The melodies rose into the sky, carrying with them the promise that they would face the storm together. The rising storm days turned into weeks. The fleet grew. What had begun as a handful of ships became an armada. Not the largest in history, but one filled with determination. And beyond the stars, the enemy stirred. They had not expected resistance. They had crushed worlds before without challenge. But whispers now reached them. The humans were coming. The enemy laughed at first. What could Deathworlders do against them? But somewhere in the dark, unease grew. For the first time, their prey would fight back not with fear but with fury. The moment of truth at last, the day came. The ships, now fully prepared, gathered in formation above Luna. Their engines glowed blue, their hulls shining under the distant sun. Thousands stood ready it. The Terran fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm breaking into calm skies. One by one, their ships tore through the veil of light, heavy hulls shimmering against the endless darkness. On the bridges of every vessel, men and women sat in silence, staring at the images now filling their screens. The world ahead was burning. Cities that had once glowed with life were now scars of fire. Great towers had fallen, their broken shadows stretching across the land. In orbit, shattered stations drifted lifeless, their remains circling like silent tombs. The signal humanity had heard was no exaggeration. The people who lived here were on the edge of extinction. Admiral Kalen stood at the center of the Terran flagship's command deck. His jaw tightened as he studied the chaos. "So it is true," he murmured. His officers waited for orders, but for a moment the Admiral did not speak. He was watching, listening to the silence of a dying world. Then his voice cut through the air. "All ships, prepare for combat. Form defensive lines between the planet and incoming hostiles. Today we do not conquer, we shield." A chorus of acknowledgments followed. Engines roared. The Terran fleet began to move, iron shields of Earth rising into position. On the surface of the planet, survivors cowered in underground shelters. They had sent their call into the void weeks ago and had long stopped hoping for an answer. Their children asked why the skies still burned, and their elders could not find words. Then one child pointed upward, eyes wide. Through the cracks in the clouds, shapes appeared, new ships, dark and sharp, dropping from the heavens. "They have returned," someone whispered. Fear rippled through the shelter. At first they believed it was only more enemy reinforcements. But then something strange happened. The new ships did not open fire on their cities. Instead, they placed themselves between the planet and the attacking armada. The survivors blinked in confusion. "Who are they?" Above, the answer was written in light and fire. The enemy fleet surged forward, certain of another easy victory. For cycles, they had crushed resistance without challenge. Now facing the Terran fleet, they expected the same. Their weapons lit the darkness, streams of deadly energy rushing toward the planet. But the beams never reached their targets. Human ships intercepted them, shields flaring, hulls trembling, but still they stood. Then came the reply. From the guns of the Terran fleet thundered bolts of light, their fury cutting across space. The void filled with fire as the Deathworlders announced their arrival. On the flagship's bridge, Admiral Kalen gave the next command. "Forward batteries, target their lead ships. Do not let them touch the surface." The Terran gunners obeyed. Massive cannons unleashed their strength, ripping through enemy hulls. Where humans lacked elegant design, they compensated with raw determination and clever engineering. Their ships were not graceful. They were resilient, built to take punishment and strike back harder. The enemy soon realized this battle would not be simple. They had expected fear. Instead, they faced resistance fiercer than any they had known. Inside one of the shelters, the survivors listened as the skies shook. Some dared to peek outside. They saw bright streaks crossing the heavens, fire clashing with fire. But what caught their eyes most was not the violence, it was the shield. A wall of unknown vessels standing firm between them and death. A young alien named Sira whispered, "They are fighting for us." Her voice trembled, caught between disbelief and hope. None around her could answer, because they were all thinking the same. Back in orbit, the battle grew harsher. Terran ships were struck. Hulls cracked, fire spread, alarms screamed. Yet each time a vessel fell, another rushed forward to cover the gap. Humanity refused to retreat. On board the carrier Resolute, Commander Rena led her squadron of fighters into the fray. Her voice was steady as she spoke to her pilots. "Remember why we are here? Protect the planet. Protect each other." The fighters swarmed like angry sparks, weaving between enemy cruisers, striking weak points and drawing fire away from the larger Terran ships. Losses mounted, but still they fought on with the stubborn courage of those who had grown on a dangerous world. The enemy began to falter. They had never faced opponents who risked everything not for conquest but for strangers. Their strategy cracked under the relentless will of the Deathworlders. Hours passed. Smoke filled bridges. Wounded soldiers were carried to medical bays. But slowly, surely, the tide shifted. The once dominant attackers now found themselves pushed back. Their formations broke as humans pressed forward, teeth bared, unyielding. At last, Admiral Kalen spoke again, his voice calm but heavy. "They retreat." Across the fleet, exhausted cheers erupted. Yet the Admiral's eyes did not soften. He knew this was only the beginning. Still, for this moment, they had done the impossible. They had stood between extinction and survival. On the planet below, the survivors emerged from their shelters. They looked to the skies, where Terran ships still burned but held their ground. For the first time in weeks, the air was not filled with the roar of destruction, but with the quiet of hope. In a clearing outside a ruined city, Sierra stood with her people as a human shuttle descended. The survivors shielded their eyes against the dust, hearts pounding with both fear and wonder. The hatch opened and figures stepped out, tall, armored, faces determined. There were no grand speeches, no declarations. The humans simply offered hands, lifting the weak, guiding the lost, sharing supplies. First contact had come not with words but with action, and in that simple act, the survivors understood. The Deathworlders had come, and they had come to save them. Word count, 1310, kept cinematic flow, clear English, and engaging action without crossing any limits. Would you like me to continue with Part 4? Deathworld tactics in the same detailed 1300-word style. You said? Part 4. 1300 words ka lekho or interesting hona chahiye or third-person style ma lekhni hai or simple basic English ka. Don't use any violated word. So please avoid any violated content. ChatGPT said absolutely. Here's Part 4. Deathworld tactics, expanded into a 1300-word HFY story segment, written in third-person style, using simple English, and with no violated content. This part focuses on humanity's ingenuity and resilience as they engage the enemy despite being outnumbered. Part 4. Deathworld tactics, approx. 1300 words. The alien sky burned with chaos, but the humans did not falter. In the aftermath of their first engagement, the Terran fleet regrouped above the planet. Damaged ships limped back to orbit, their hulls scarred, engines sputtering, but their crews were alive and resolute. Admiral Kalen gathered his officers on the flagship Resolute. Holograms of the battlefield hovered in the command chamber, displaying enemy movements, broken formations, and weak points. Every sector, every approach, every asteroid belt was mapped and analyzed. The humans were outnumbered, yes, but they were far from powerless. Listen carefully, Kalen said, his voice steady and sharp. They expect brute force. That is what has worked for them for centuries. But we do not fight like them. We fight like Deathworlders. We adapt, we survive, we use the environment, and we turn their confidence into weakness. The officers nodded, understanding the meaning of his words. Humanity had been forged in hardship. Earth had taught them to thrive where others could not. They would do the same here. Below, the enemy regrouped, counting the cost of underestimating humans. They had crushed civilizations before, but these newcomers were different. Their attacks were precise, their movements unpredictable. They used terrain, gravity, and debris to their advantage, and they had not yet revealed the full extent of their tactics. The first strategy was simple yet effective: ambush. Humans guided their ships into the asteroid belts surrounding the planet. The rocks were old, jagged, and dangerous. Most fleets avoided such regions, fearing collision, but humans had trained for years in Earth's orbital debris, dodging asteroids and surviving storms. Using the belt as cover, human fighters darted like shadows between massive rocks, waiting for enemy cruisers to pass before striking. "Here they come," Commander Rena whispered in her fighter squadron. Her voice was calm, though her hands tightened around the controls. "On my mark, now!" Plasma cannons flared from hidden positions, striking enemy vessels that assumed the path was safe. Explosions tore through the hulls, and before the enemy could recover, the fighters slipped back into the shadows. The first ambush was a success. Meanwhile, the fleet experimented with orbital traps. Mines and energy nets were laid across likely enemy paths, their triggers set to detect even the smallest ships. When enemy fighters attempted to flank the humans, they found themselves caught in invisible webs of light, immobilized until human boarding teams arrived. These boarding teams were not ordinary soldiers. They had trained on Earth's harshest environments, surviving jungles, deserts, and polar storms. Now in the void, they used zero-gravity maneuvers to infiltrate enemy vessels, neutralizing control centers and disabling weapons. The enemy, expecting distant bombardment, found themselves facing close-quarters combat unlike any they had ever known. On the planetary surface, human engineers worked with the surviving aliens to construct hidden fortifications. The humans studied alien terrain and wildlife, learning where the enemy was likely to move and where natural defenses could be strengthened. Eve, were you? The skies above the burned planet had cleared, leaving a horizon streaked with orange and silver from the fires that had been extinguished, and the glow of human vessels still in orbit. For the first time in many cycles, the survivors walked in sunlight without fear of attack. Humans remained in orbit, vigilant, repairing ships and preparing for anything that might follow. Admiral Kalen stood on the flagship Resolute, observing the planet below. Cities had been reduced to rubble, but life persisted. Children played among broken walls, scavenging what little they could find, while elders organized efforts to rebuild. It was slow, painstaking work, but hope flowed through every action. Syrah, the young alien who had first witnessed humanity's arrival, approached him cautiously. "You've done what no one else could," she said softly. "You fought for us. For strangers, why?" Kalen looked down at the young alien with tired eyes, softened by relief and pride. "Because someone needed help," he replied. "Because that is what we do. We survive. We protect, and we never leave those in need behind." The survivors around them nodded. Words were not enough to express their gratitude, yet their faces spoke volumes. They had learned something that would stay with them forever. Humanity's courage was not in weapons, but in their spirit. Below the planet, human engineers and soldiers worked alongside aliens to rebuild what had been lost. Makeshift shelters rose among ruins. Water systems were restored, and the first signs of agricultural recovery began. Children watched as humans taught them simple engineering techniques. And even alien warriors learned combat strategies adapted for survival rather than destruction. Commander Rena led a team in reconstructing an orbital station. Debris floated around them, hazardous and unforgiving, yet they moved with precision. "Every piece matters," she said to her crew. "Even the smallest part can make the difference between survival and loss." The aliens assisting them marveled at the efficiency and care with which humans worked, turning wreckage into functional machinery. The survivors began to share stories of what they had witnessed. They spoke of the ambushes in asteroid belts, of fighters swooping down to protect fleeing civilians, and of the boarding teams neutralizing enemy ships in ways no one had thought possible. Children repeated the tales to each other in wide-eyed excitement, learning lessons not just of survival, but of courage, adaptability, and unity. In orbit, Admiral Kalen convened the Terran fleet once more. Ships that had survived the battles were repaired and refitted. Human pilots recounted daring maneuvers. Officers discussed tactics, and engineers presented new methods to strengthen defenses. But Kalen's focus was clear. This was not a time to celebrate. This was a time to teach and to prepare. "Humanity has always survived where others would fail," he said. "We have fought for ourselves, but today we have fought for others. That is our legacy. And it does not end here. We have given these people hope. Now we must ensure it lasts." The rescued aliens began to show signs of remarkable recovery. Farms grew once more in fertile valleys, energy systems hummed, and a network of communication towers connected settlements across the planet. Survivors took inspiration from humans' determination, and under their guidance began to organize councils for governance, defense, and education. Syrah, now older and wiser from the trials she had witnessed, walked among her people. "We will rebuild stronger than before," she said. "We will not forget who came to us when all others turned away. We will honor them in everything we do." Humans did not demand monuments or titles. Their reward was the knowledge that life would continue, that hope had been restored, and that a species now knew it was not alone. The Terran fleet, while mighty in weaponry, had proven that humanity's strength lay in more than firepower. It lay in resilience, ingenuity, and the choice to act when action was needed most. Months passed. The planet healed. The alien people flourished under careful guidance, creating schools, marketplaces, and cultural centers that celebrated both their history and the lessons they had learned. They adopted strategies humans had used, preparing themselves for a future where they could defend their own homes. Across the galaxy, the story of humanity's arrival spread. Other species who had doubted Earth's capabilities began to reconsider. Some were inspired. Some were wary. All could see the undeniable truth. The Deathworlders did not fight for conquest. They fought for what was right. They had changed the course of a civilization in ways no one had anticipated. On Earth, news of the victory reached home. Streets filled with celebrations not for war but for courage. Scholars debated strategies, children played simulations of the battles, and veterans of past conflicts smiled quietly, knowing humanity had once again proved its unique nature. In the fleet above the alien planet, Admiral Kalen watched the final enemy remnants flee into the void. He allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. Humanity had faced impossible odds and prevailed. Yet he knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast, filled with dangers and mysteries, but he was certain of one thing. When cries for help echoed in the darkness, humanity would answer. Commander Rena joined him, her armor scorched but her posture proud. "We made a difference," she said. "Not because we had to, but because we chose to." Kalen nodded. "And that is why we are Deathworlders. That is why our name carries weight. Strength is measured not just in battle, but in the courage to stand for others when no one else will." On the planet, Syrah and her people built a memorial, not of stone or metal, but of life. Trees planted in perfect rows, each representing a human who had fallen, survived, or fought alongside them. Streams were cleared, gardens cultivated, and songs of gratitude were sung. Every day the survivors remembered the courage that had saved them. One child asked, "Will they come back if we need them?" Syrah smiled. "Yes, they will come. The Deathworlders always keep their word. They fight not for reward, but because it is right. That is their legacy." Back in orbit, human ships prepared to depart but not to vanish forever. They left behind advisors, engineers, and educators who would continue to help the aliens rebuild. The rest of the fleet returned to Earth, carrying lessons of battle, survival, and the incredible impact of acting when others would not. As the Terran fleet entered hyperspace, the galaxy seemed quieter. The SOS had been answered and the aliens had survived. But more than that, humanity had proven something essential. Even in a universe of fear, indifference and overwhelming odds, courage and ingenuity could turn the tide. On Earth, humans celebrated quietly, knowing their deeds would ripple across the stars. They had answered a call that no one else dared to answer. They had faced the impossible, survived, and inspired, and the galaxy would remember them, not as conquerors, but as protectors, innovators, and Deathworlders. Even in the far reaches of space, whenever a distress signal flickered in the void, someone whispered, "If anyone will come, it will be the Deathworlders," and somewhere, a fleet of human ships listened, engines ready, hearts steady, always prepared to answer the call. The legacy had been written, not in destruction, but in hope, courage, and action. Humanity had shown that the greatest strength lay not in fear, but in the choice to stand for others when all seemed lost. And the galaxy would never forget it. The dawn broke slowly over Theral, painting the sky with streaks of gold and crimson. The city, once ruined and trembling under fear, now stood ready. Barricades, traps, and hidden defenses had been strengthened under human guidance. The Theral had learned the ways of preparation, of strategy, and of courage. They no longer waited in terror, they stood together, ready to face the returning Vorak. Above the horizon, Vorak ships appeared as tiny silhouettes at first, then grew larger, revealing their black claw-like hulls against the twin suns. Thousands of soldiers poured into view, their weapons gleaming red in the sunlight. The Vorak roared in confidence, expecting an easy conquest. But this time Theral eyes did not widen in fear. This time the humans were not alone. Captain Reyes raised his hand, signaling the troops to advance. The humans took their positions along the barricades, behind rooftops, and in trenches. The Theral, now trained and resolute, followed suit, moving quietly, alert, and organized. Their hearts no longer quivered with fear. They had been given courage, and now they would wield it. The Vorak commander sneered, his voice booming across communication channels. "Deathworlders! You are small, weak, and foolish. We will crush you in this pathetic planet." Reyes's voice carried back, calm and steady. "You underestimate us. Today, you will see that even the smallest can fight with the strength of many. Today you will learn the price of underestimating Deathworlders." The Vorak laughed, a deep, cruel sound, and charged. The first clash was brutal. Vorak soldiers poured through open streets, their heavy weapons blasting anything in their path. But the humans were prepared. Snipers perched on rooftops, dropping enemy soldiers with precise fire. Mines buried in the streets exploded beneath advancing troops. Guerrilla squads ambushed from alleys, striking and disappearing before the enemy could respond. The Theral, following their training, moved with agility and confidence. They carried weapons alongside humans, setting traps, warning allies and aiding the wounded. They had learned that courage was not about recklessness, it was about action, timing, and unity. A group of Vorak war beasts thundered into the city square. The ground shook with each step. The Theral froze at first, their instinct urging them to flee. But the humans did not move. They faced the monsters head-on. Sergeant Hale directed squads to lure the beast into narrow streets. Explosives planted on the walls brought down chunks of debris, slowing the creature's advance. Snipers struck at weak points in their armor. Brave soldiers leapt onto their backs, planting charges before vaulting to safety. One by one, the beasts fell, roaring in frustration before collapsing. The Theral gasped, then nodded. They began to move with the humans, striking with precision and bravery they never imagined possible. The battle stretched for hours. Smoke filled the streets, fire burned through ruined buildings, and the cries of soldiers echoed across the city. But slowly the tide began to turn. The Vorak, expecting an easy conquest, found themselves trapped and attacked from all sides. Captain Reyes led a squad into the heart of the Vorak forces, striking at the command units. The humans coordinated with Theral squads, flanking the enemy and cutting off reinforcements. Every victory boosted morale. Every fallen Vorak showed that courage and unity could overcome even the strongest foe. Elder Cyril watched from a safe distance, her hands clenched in awe. "They are incredible," she whispered to Veyar. "Not just in battle, but in heart. They fight not for conquest, but to protect. This is something our people needed to see." Veyar nodded slowly. "And our people have learned. Today, Theral fight not as victims, but as warriors, as allies. Humans have given us more than strength. They have given us courage." As the battle neared its climax, the Vorak commander called for his elite guards, towering warriors who had never been defeated. They surged forward, breaking human lines in several places. Panic began to ripple through the Theral ranks, but Captain Reyes acted swiftly. He gathered the human leaders and formed a counterattack. "We cannot let fear guide us. We hold this city together. Follow my lead and we will stop them." With coordinated precision, the humans struck. Flanking attacks from the Theral caught the Vorak by surprise. Traps funneled the elite warriors into narrow alleys. Mines exploded beneath them, throwing them off balance. Human sharpshooters targeted weak spots in their armor, while squads rushed to finish them off. In the end, the elite guards fell, and the Vorak commander realized his forces were collapsing. His roars of anger echoed in the city, but even he knew defeat was inevitable. The Vorak retreated. Their transports lifted into the sky, carrying the wounded and defeated. The humans and Theral stood amidst the ruins, exhausted but victorious. The city was battered, but it was free. The Theral, many still trembling, began to step forward. They hugged one another, tears of relief streaming down their faces. Humans moved among them, offering water, bandages, and comfort. Elder Cyril approached Captain Reyes, bowing deeply. "You have done what we believed impossible. You have saved our people, our homes, and perhaps our spirit. You are truly remarkable." Reyes shook his head. "No one is remarkable alone. We did this together. Your people fought with us, learned, and never gave up. You are just as brave as we are." Cyril's eyes shone with tears. "Then perhaps we are not so gentle or weak after all." Children emerged from hiding, their eyes wide as they watched the humans. One small Theral girl ran up to Sergeant Hale. "You saved us. Will you teach me to be brave too?" Hale knelt down, smiling gently. "Bravery isn't about never being scared. It's about standing even when you are. And yes, I will teach you. You already have it in you." The children laughed, the sound ringing through the ruins like music. For the first time in weeks, the city of Theral felt alive, filled with hope instead of fear. As night fell, the survivors gathered to celebrate. Fires burned safely, food was shared, and stories of the battle were told. The Theral no longer saw themselves as victims. They had seen what courage and unity could achieve. Elder Veyar spoke to the gathered crowd. "We have learned from our visitors. They came from a world of danger and struggle. Yet they fight not for glory, but to protect others. Let us remember this day, not only as the day our city was saved, but as the day our people were reborn in courage." Captain Reyes addressed the crowd as well. "You fought bravely. You learned quickly. Today, you proved that no matter the odds, life is worth protecting and courage is worth embracing. You are no longer just survivors, you are warriors. And together we can face anything. The Theral cheered, their voices rising in unison. They had faced impossible fear and emerged victorious. And in that moment, every citizen understood what the galaxy would now witness. Deathworlders inspire courage wherever they walk. The next day, the humans prepared to leave, their mission complete. The Theral, now confident and skilled, waved goodbye, knowing they would be able to defend their world if needed in the future. Elder Cyril approached Captain Reyes one last time. You have shown us that hope is stronger than fear, that courage can be taught, that unity can overcome even the greatest odds. Our world will never forget this, Reyes smiled. We don't forget either. You have proven that even a gentle people can fight with bravery. You will survive, and so will your world. That is the greatest victory of all. As the human ships lifted into the sky, disappearing into the stars, the Theral looked at their city, not as ruins, but as a place of resilience and hope. The galaxy would remember this battle. The Vorak would never underestimate humans again, and the Theral, once fragile and fearful, had discovered the power of courage, unity, and the indomitable spirit of the Deathworlders. For in a universe full of darkness, hope could be found not just in strength, but in the willingness to stand together and fight for what is right. And so, the story of Theral and the humans became legend, a tale told across worlds, reminding everyone that even in the face of overwhelming odds, bravery can change the fate of a civilization.